The human mind is a collection of momentum. Every action, every response, and every silent assumption you made yesterday tends to form the blueprint for what you will experience tomorrow. Most people live in a state of continuous reaction, assuming that the reality they navigate is an unchangeable landscape. They treat their habits, their environment, and their current limitations as permanent fixtures of existence. But if you look closely at the mechanics of human behavior, you begin to observe a different truth. The life you currently experience is not a fixed reality. It is a biological and psychological pattern that has been practiced, reinforced, and repeated until it became automatic. To delete your old life is not an act of destruction, it is an act of clarity. It is the conscious decision to stop feeding the momentum of a reality that no longer serves your development. Consider the structure of a building. Before an architect can erect a new, modern tower, they must evaluate the ground. If an unstable, outdated structure occupies that space, no amount of paint, new furniture, or superficial remodeling will make the foundation secure. The old structure must be systematically dismantled. In human psychology, we often try to build a new reality by simply layering positive thinking or temporary habits on top of a compromised foundation. We attempt to introduce discipline into an environment designed for distraction. We try to cultivate focus while maintaining the same social dynamics, the same internal narratives, and the same reactive routines that created the stagnation in the first place. This approach rarely succeeds. The old momentum is simply too strong. True transformation requires an interruption. It demands that you step back from the daily stream of reaction and look at your life as an engineer looks at a system. A system is neither good nor bad. It is simply designed to produce a specific output. If your current system produces fatigue, distraction, financial stagnation, or emotional unrest, then the system is running perfectly. It is fulfilling its design. To change the output, you do not fight the results. You re-engineer the system. This process begins with a quiet, deliberate pause. It requires an internal shift from being the passive inhabitant of your life to becoming its conscious architect. This shift is not loud. It does not require dramatic announcements to the world or emotional outbursts. The most profound shifts in human life are almost always silent. They occur when an individual decides, with absolute internal clarity, that they will no longer participate in their own stagnation. Think about the concepts that govern your daily existence. Your identity, the narrative you hold about who you are, what you are capable of, and what you deserve, is largely a construct of past experiences. You learn to view yourself through the lens of early failures, societal expectations, and the feedback of those around you. Over time, this construct became comfortable. Even if it is a painful or limiting identity, it is familiar. The human brain naturally craves familiarity because familiarity requires less cognitive energy. It is safe. It is predictable. When you attempt to change, your brain often interprets the new behavior as a threat to its established equilibrium. This is why standard self-help methods so often fail. They treat change as a matter of mere willpower, but willpower is a finite cognitive resource. It drains quickly under stress, fatigue, or temptation. Engineering a new reality is not about wrestling with your old self through sheer force of will. It is about understanding the cognitive and environmental mechanisms that keep you trapped, and systematically altering them so that success becomes the path of least resistance. Let us look closely at the concept of reality engineering. A reality is not merely the physical world around you. Your reality is the specific slice of the world that you perceive, interpret, and interact with. If you are conditioned to look for obstacles, your brain will highly prioritize obstacle detection, filtering out potential opportunities. If you are conditioned to see yourself as a victim of circumstance, your mind will find evidence to support that narrative. In every conversation, every setback, and every delay, you are, in essence, trapped inside a feedback loop of your own making. To break this loop, you must first accept complete accountability for the current state of your system. This is not about blame. Blame is an emotional reaction that looks backward. Accountability is a strategic realization that looks forward. When you blame your environment, your past, or other people for your current state, you are giving away your architectural power. You are stating that your reality is determined by factors outside of your control. But when you accept accountability, you recognize that while you may not have controlled the initial conditions of your life, you are the only one responsible for the ongoing maintenance of the structure. Imagine waking up to find that you are the captain of a ship that has been drifting off course for years. You could spend your time raging against the wind, cursing the currents, or lamenting the mistakes of the previous crew. Or you can step up to the helm, look at the instruments, and adjust the rudder. The wind will still blow, and the currents will still challenge you, but your focus is now on the mechanism of steering. This text is your instrument panel. It is designed to strip away the illusions of helplessness, the noise of modern distraction, and the comforting lies that keep people trapped in cycles of unfulfilled potential. We will explore the deep psychological reframing necessary to dismantle the old identity. We will examine the strategic clarity required to construct an environment that automates focus and discipline. We will analyze human behavior ethically, understanding how to navigate social dynamics with discernment rather than suspicion, and how to build a reputation based on competence and reliability. This is not a journey of quick fixes or superficial motivation. Motivation is a feeling. It comes and goes like the weather. This is an exploration of architecture. It is about design, strategy, and daily execution. It requires a calm, deliberate willingness to look at your current life, recognize what must be deleted, and begin the precise work of engineering what comes next. As we move forward, let go of the need for immediate reassurance. Let go of the desire for a comfortable path. The process of dismantling an old life can feel disorienting. It can feel lonely. When you stop participating in the reactive patterns that everyone else takes for granted, you may notice a distance growing between yourself and the noise of the world. This is not a sign of failure. It is the natural result of an interruption. It means the old momentum is slowing down. It means the ground is finally being cleared. Take a breath. Step away from the urgency of your current problems. Look at your life from a position of elevated perspective. The old patterns only hold power as long as you run them automatically. The moment you observe them with objective clarity, their grip begins to loosen. You are no longer just the actor in the play. You are the playwright, looking at the script, deciding which lines to cross out, and determining how the next act will unfold. The transition from reaction to engineering begins now. The system you currently inhabit is perfectly optimized to yield the results you are currently getting. To change the results, you must change the design, the anatomy of the default state. To build a new reality, you must first study the mechanics of the prison you did not realize you were inhabiting. This prison is not made of stone or iron. It is constructed from the invisible architecture of your default state. The default state is the collection of automatic thoughts, neurological pathways, and environmental cues that dictate your life when you are not actively paying attention. For the vast majority of human existence, individuals operate entirely within this subconscious loop. They believe they are making conscious choices, but in reality, they are merely executing pre-programmed responses to external stimuli. Consider what happens when you first wake up. For most, the very first action of the day is not an act of conscious intent, but a manifestation of habit. The hand reaches for the phone, the eyes scan for notifications. The mind immediately floods with the anxieties, demands, and opinions of the outside world. Before your feet have even touched the floor, your cognitive state has been hijacked. You have allowed the external environment to dictate your emotional baseline for the day. You are already in a state of reaction. This is the default state in operation. It is highly efficient because the human brain is a metabolically expensive organ. It consumes roughly 20% of your body's energy, despite accounting for only 2% of its weight. To conserve this precious energy, the brain is constantly looking for ways to automate behavior. Every time you repeat an action, react to a frustration in the same way, or tell yourself the same story about your limitations, the brain strengthens the neural connections responsible for that behavior. Over time, these connections become thick highways of information. The behavior becomes automatic. It becomes your default. The danger of the default state is that it operates entirely in service of survival and comfort, not optimization or fulfillment. Your biology does not care if you achieve your goals, build financial stability, or master your emotional landscape. Your biology cares about keeping you safe, warm, and alive, with the least amount of caloric expenditure possible. Therefore, if left unmanaged, your brain will naturally guide you toward the path of least resistance, distraction, short-term gratification, and predictability. To delete your old life, you must become deeply aware of these automated loops. You must begin to observe yourself with the cold, objective detachment of a researcher observing a subject in a laboratory. When you feel the sudden urge to abandon a difficult task and scroll through media, you must not judge the urge, you must map it. Where did it come from? What was the trigger? Was it a subtle feeling of inadequacy? Was it the frustration of hitting a cognitive wall? By observing the default state without emotional reaction, you begin to separate your true awareness from your automated programming. You realize a fundamental psychological truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the space in which your thoughts occur. You are not your urges. You are the observer of those urges. This realization is the first crack in the foundation of your old reality. When you begin to study your default state, you will notice that it is heavily reinforced by your physical and social environment. Human beings are profoundly situational creatures. We like to believe that our character and willpower are absolute. But human behavior is largely a function of context. If you place a person with high discipline in an environment filled with constant disruption, chaotic visual cues, and low vibrational social circles, their discipline will eventually erode. The friction required to maintain focus in a hostile environment is simply too costly over time. Many individuals blame themselves for their lack of consistency, labeling themselves as lazy or undisciplined. This is an incorrect diagnosis. In many cases, the individual does not lack discipline, they simply lack environmental alignment. They are trying to sail against a gale force wind while refusing to adjust their sails. Their environment is actively conspiring against their intentions, reinforcing the very default state they claim they want to escape. Look around your current space. Look at the digital interfaces you interact with, the layout of your room, and the metrics you track daily. Are these elements designed to pull you into your default state of consumption, or are they engineered to push you into a state of production? If your phone is always within arm's reach, if your workspace is cluttered with reminders of past stress, and if your digital feeds are optimized to trigger your outrage or envy, you are living in a trap of your own maintenance. You are paying a daily tax on your cognitive energy just to resist the temptations built into your immediate surroundings. Dismantling this default architecture requires radical environmental sanitation. This is the practical application of deletion. You do not negotiate with distractions, you eliminate them. You remove the apps that consume your attention without adding value. You redesign your physical space so that the tools of your craft are easily accessible, while the vectors of distraction require significant friction to access. If you wish to stop a behavior, increase the number of steps required to perform it. If you wish to cultivate a behavior, reduce the friction to zero. However, the physical environment is only one layer of the default state. The deeper, more insidious layer is the social environment. The humans you interact with most frequently exert a massive, invisible gravity on your reality. This is not due to any mystical force, but rather the hardwired biological mechanism of mirror neurons. Human brains are designed to copy the behaviors, emotional tones, and linguistic patterns of the tribe. It is an evolutionary survival strategy. To be different from the tribe was historically dangerous. It meant exile. Therefore, your brain naturally seeks to conform to the average baseline of your social circle. If your circle consists of individuals who accept mediocrity, who spend their time complaining about circumstances they refuse to change, and who view growth with suspicion, your brain will subtly adapt to match that frequency. Every time you attempt to elevate your thinking or change your habits, you will encounter a subtle, often unconscious resistance from those around you. They may mask this resistance as concern, or they may use humor to pull you back down to the collective baseline. This is not necessarily born of malice, it is born of their own discomfort. Your growth serves as a mirror that reflects their stagnation. and most people would rather shatter the mirror than look at their own reflection. Engineering a new reality requires you to manage these social dynamics with absolute strategic clarity and ethical boundaries. It does not mean you become hostile or arrogant. It does not mean you deliver grand speeches about how you are leaving people behind. Arrogance is a sign of internal weakness. It shows that you are still dependent on their validation of your transformation. The true architect moves in silence. You simply begin to invest your time, attention, and emotional energy elsewhere. You quietly reduce your exposure to environments and conversations that reinforce your old default state. This transition period is often marked by an intense psychological phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance. As you begin to delete old habits and step away from familiar environments, your brain will experience a sense of profound unease. It will feel as though you are losing your identity. You might encounter thoughts that tell you this effort is pointless, that you are pretending to be someone you are not, or that your old life wasn't actually that bad. This is the critical inflection point. This discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is proof that the old system is losing its grip. It is the sensation of neural pathways being starved of their usual reinforcement. If you give in to this discomfort and return to your old routines, you validate the brain's fear response, making future attempts at change even more difficult. But if you stand firm, if you navigate through the fog of discomfort with calm, disciplined execution, the brain will eventually begin to adapt. It will start to build new pathways. It will establish a new, elevated default state. The work of deleting your old life is therefore an iterative process of systemic optimization. You identify an automated loop that produces stagnation. You isolate the environmental and social cues that trigger it, and you systematically alter the architecture to support a different outcome. You do not wait for inspiration. You do not rely on an emotional surge. You rely on design. As you conclude this initial phase of observation, ask yourself honestly, what are the current parameters of your default state? What are the automatic behaviors you run when you are tired, stressed, or bored? Who are the individuals reinforcing those behaviors? Write the script of your current defaults down if you must. Look at it objectively and prepare to cross out the lines that no longer belong in your reality. The architecture of your past only dictates your future if you continue to let it run on autopilot. True freedom is not the ability to do whatever you feel like doing. It is the absolute mastery over the automatic impulses that keep you small. The cognitive reset and identity architecture. To dismantle a structure that has stood for decades, you must look beneath the surface. You must bypass the visible behaviors and penetrate the bedrock of human reality, the identity. In psychological terms, your identity is the set of deeply held beliefs about who you are, what is possible for you, and how the world operates in relation to your presence. Every action you take, every word you utter, and every boundary you enforce is filtered through this internal self-image. You cannot consistently behave in a manner that contradicts your definition of yourself. If you attempt to do so using willpower alone, the psychological friction will eventually force you back into alignment with your old programming. This is why most personal transformations fail before they even begin. An individual attempts to change their life by modifying their external actions while leaving their internal identity completely intact. They try to build financial independence while secretly identifying as someone who is chronically financially insecure. They try to build a disciplined physique while maintaining the identity of a person who is fundamentally lazy and unmotivated. This creates an unsustainable internal division. The mind cannot tolerate this discrepancy for long, and it will almost always sabotage the new behavior to restore psychological equilibrium. Therefore, the engineering of a new reality must begin with a profound cognitive reset. You must treat your mind as a master architect treats a compromised plot of land. You must clear away the psychological debris of your past failures, the labels placed upon you by others, and the limiting narratives you have repeated to yourself until they felt like objective truths. Let us dissect the anatomy of a narrative. A narrative is simply an interpretation of an event that has been practiced so many times it is now accepted as fact. If you experienced a significant failure in your past, perhaps a failed venture, a broken relationship, or a period of severe instability, your brain, in its effort to protect you from future pain, likely built a narrative around that event. It may have told you that you lack the capacity for high-level execution, or that security is an illusion, or that you are meant to struggle. When you accept these narratives, you begin to experience what psychologists call confirmation bias. Your brain becomes highly selective in its attention. It actively searches the environment for evidence that validates your limiting beliefs, while completely ignoring opportunities, resources, and insights that contradict them. If you believe the world is inherently hostile and devoid of opportunity, your perception will filter out potential avenues for advancement, leaving you trapped in a self-fulfilling prophecy of stagnation. To delete your old life, you must interrupt this feedback loop through intentional cognitive reframing. Reframing is not the practice of superficial positive thinking. It is not about lying to yourself or pretending that challenges do not exist. Rather, it is the disciplined practice of separating objective reality from your emotional interpretation of it. Reality is objective. Your narrative is subjective. When a setback occurs, the unrefined mind immediately asks, "Why does this always happen to me?" This question is poorly engineered. It assumes a personal animus in the universe and positions you as a helpless victim. The architect's mind asks a completely different question. What is the data here, and how can this variable be integrated into the next iteration of the strategy? By shifting from an emotional reaction to an analytical investigation, you immediately disarm the narrative. You strip the event of its power to define your identity. Identity architecture is the systematic process of deliberately designing the self-image required to sustain the reality you wish to create. It requires you to work from the inside out, rather than the outside in. You do not wait until you have achieved massive success to feel competent. You cultivate the internal discipline, posture, and standards of a competent individual right now, in the present moment, within the parameters of your current circumstances. Think about how you treat your time, your space, and your word. An individual who operates with a high-level identity treats their time as an invaluable, non-renewable resource. They do not allow it to be leaked away by meaningless distractions or low-value interactions. They treat their physical environment with respect, understanding that external order reflects and reinforces internal clarity. Most importantly, they treat their own word as an absolute contract. When they state that they will execute a task, it is as good as done, because their self-respect is directly tied to their reliability. If you wish to change your identity, you must begin by keeping the small promises you make to yourself. Every time you set an alarm and actually get out of bed without hitting snooze, you cast a vote for the identity of a disciplined individual. Every time you sit down to work and refuse to look at your phone for the designated block of time, you cast a vote for the identity of a focused individual. These victories may seem trivial in isolation, but cumulatively, they alter the psychological landscape. They provide your brain with empirical evidence that you are no longer the person you used to be. This internal shift changes the way you interact with the external world. When you operate from a secure, well-engineered identity, you no longer require constant validation from your environment. You do not seek applause, approval, or permission from those around you. You understand that your path is yours alone to walk, and that the opinions of others are merely reflections of their own internal realities, not accurate measurements of your worth or potential. This brings us to an essential aspect of human behavior, the cultivation of emotional regulation. An architect cannot build a lasting structure if they are constantly swayed by emotional turbulence. In the process of deleting your old life, you will inevitably encounter friction, criticism, and self-doubt. If your actions are dependent on how you feel in any given moment, your progress will be erratic and short-lived. To achieve strategic clarity, you must learn to observe your emotions without allowing them to dictate your behavior. When fear, anxiety, or resentment arise, acknowledge their presence as biological data. Your body is experiencing a chemical spike, nothing more, nothing less. You do not need to fight the emotion, nor do you need to obey it. You simply allow the wave to peak and subside, while your rational mind remains firmly in control of the rudder. This is what it means to possess a calm but powerful presence. It is the ability to remain stable while the storm rages around you. As you begin to anchor this new identity, you will notice a natural shift in your priorities. The shallow amusements and short-term gratifications that once consumed your leisure time will begin to lose their appeal. They will feel incompatible with the person you are becoming. This is not a sacrifice, it is a natural alignment. When you value your potential more than your comfort, discipline ceases to feel like a punishment and begins to feel like a form of self-preservation. Look at the trajectory of your daily life through this lens. If an objective observer were to watch your actions for an entire week without hearing your words, what identity would they assume you possess? Would they see an individual who is building a legacy of competence and focus, or would they see someone who is drifting through a sequence of comfortable distractions? The truth is found in the execution, not the intention. Let go of the need to convince anyone of your transformation. Do not argue, do not defend your choices, and do not waste your breath explaining your new trajectory to those who are content with their own stagnation. Your results will speak with a clarity that no words can match. Focus your energy entirely on the internal work of reconstruction. Clear the ground, reset the cognitive framework, and begin executing the daily habits that match your highest ideal. The old life is deleted not by fighting it, but by rendering it obsolete through the sheer power of your new design. The physics of environmental cleansing. To engineer a new reality, you must understand that your mind does not exist in a vacuum. It is deeply intertwined with the physical space you occupy. In the study of human behavior, we often overestimate the power of internal motivation while completely ignoring the brutal physics of our immediate surroundings. Every object you see, every sound you hear, and every digital interface you engage with acts as a silent prompt for action. If your environment is an unmanaged catalogue of past choices, old vices, and chaotic stimuli, your brain is forced to spend a massive amount of cognitive energy simply filtering out the noise. To delete your old life, you must execute an uncompromised environmental cleansing. Consider the law of least resistance. Water flows through the path that offers the fewest obstacles. The human brain, seeking metabolic efficiency, behaves in precisely the same manner. If a highly disruptive habit is easy to perform, the brain will choose it automatically when willpower is low. If an optimal, high-level habit requires significant effort or preparation to initiate, the brain will find an excuse to avoid it. Knowing this, the strategic architect does not rely on sheer willpower to maintain focus. Instead, they engineer the environment so that optimal behaviors are frictionless and destructive behaviors are intensely difficult to execute. This requires a systematic audit of your physical space. Look closely at the room where you work, the area where you rest, and the objects that surround you. Every item carries an implicit psychological association. If your desk is covered in old paperwork, unorganized devices, and reminders of unfinished obligations, it is actively broadcasting stress signals to your nervous system. Your brain interprets clutter as an unresolved problem, triggering a low-grade, constant release of cortisol. This subtle chemical drag reduces your capacity for deep focus and executive decision-making. Dismantling this pattern requires a process of radical minimization. Clear your workspace until only the essential tools of your craft remain. If you are a writer, your desk should contain nothing but your machine and perhaps a notebook. If you are a designer, only the necessary creative instruments should be visible. By stripping away the visual noise, you remove the competing options for your attention. You signal to your brain that this specific space is optimized for one purpose and one purpose only: high-level execution. The physical room, however, is only the first layer of the modern landscape. The far more complex and hazardous environment we inhabit is digital. The average modern individual spends hours a day navigating a digital ecosystem designed by the world's most sophisticated software engineers to exploit biological vulnerabilities. The notifications, the infinite scrolls, and the bright colors of modern applications are systematically engineered to trigger rapid bursts of dopamine. This constant artificial stimulation completely desensitizes your reward pathways. Over time, normal, deep, meaningful work begins to feel incredibly boring and intolerable because it does not offer the same instant gratification. You cannot outsmart a multi-billion-dollar algorithm with willpower. You must delete the access points to reclaim your cognitive sovereignty. You must treat your digital devices as tools, not companions. Turn off every non-human notification on your phone. If it is not a direct message from a real person requiring immediate attention, it has no right to interrupt your thoughts. Place your phone in a separate room during your deep work intervals. If you must use a computer, use software blockers to restrict access to attention-draining websites. This is not a matter of deprivation, it is a matter of strategic isolation. When you increase the physical distance between yourself and the source of distraction, you introduce what behavioral psychologists call choice friction. If you have to stand up, walk to another room, and unlock a drawer to check a notification, your brain has time to interrupt the automatic impulse. The pause allows your rational mind to step in and say, "This action does not align with our current strategy." As you cleanse your physical and digital environments, you will inevitably experience a profound stillness. This stillness can initially feel incredibly jarring. For years, your mind has been accustomed to a constant background hum of noise, entertainment, and trivial updates. When that noise is suddenly removed, you are left alone with your own thoughts. It is during this quiet interlude that many individuals panic and rush back to their old distractions. They confuse the absence of noise with loneliness or boredom. But this stillness is precisely where your new reality begins to take root. In a quiet environment, your focus deepens, your thoughts become structured, your ability to think 3 steps ahead returns. You transition from a frantic gatherer of superficial information to a deep, deliberate builder of lasting systems. Let us expand this environmental principle to the sensory inputs you allow into your mind. What are you reading? What are you listening to while you commute or exercise? If you fill your mind with superficial news, gossip, and dramatic narratives, you are feeding your system low-grade raw material. An engineer cannot build a high-performance engine using low-quality fuel. Pay close attention to the concepts you consume. Prioritize long-form information, dense technical materials, strategic history, and works that require sustained intellectual effort to comprehend. By elevating the quality of your inputs, you naturally elevate the quality of your outputs. This environmental cleansing must also extend to your logistical routines. Look at your daily schedule. Is it a reactive mess, dictated by the requests of others? Or is it a structured timeline built around your primary objectives? An unmanaged schedule is an open invitation for environmental chaos. To counter this, implement strict temporal boundaries. Dedicate the first few hours of your day to your most critical, high-leverage tasks before you open your gates to the external world. Let the world wait. The emails, the messages, and the requests will still be there when your deep work block is complete. When you control the parameters of your environment, you control the probability of your success. You are no longer a victim of chance, hoping that today you will magically possess enough motivation to overcome a chaotic space. You step into your day, knowing that the terrain has been deliberately terraformed to favor your advancement. This process of environmental engineering requires consistent maintenance. The world naturally drifts toward disorder. Clutter will attempt to accumulate, devices will try to reset their settings, and people will test your boundaries. You must protect your cleared space with fierce, quiet discipline. Treat your environment as a sacred perimeter. It is the womb in which your new reality is being formed. Keep it clean, keep it structured, and let the quiet power of an engineered space carry you forward into effortless execution. The strategic calibration of human dynamics. No individual operates in isolation. To engineer a new reality, you must master the mechanics of your social environment with absolute strategic clarity and unwavering ethics. For too long, you may have approached relationships through the lens of emotional reactiveness, seeking superficial validation, or allowing the boundaries of your life to be dictated by the expectations of others. To transition into an architect of your reality, you must learn to observe human dynamics objectively, communicating effectively, and protecting your cognitive energy with quiet, uncompromising boundaries. This requires a profound shift in how you analyze human behavior. We must strip away both the naive illusion that everyone has your best interests at heart, and the paranoid cynicism that views the world as an inherently malicious trap. Humans are fundamentally driven by their own incentives, conditioning, and psychological needs. When someone reacts to your growth with subtle hostility, backhanded compliments, or attempts to pull you back into old habits, it is rarely a calculated plot against you. It is almost always a survival mechanism for their own ego. Your elevation highlights their inertia. Understanding this, ethically, removes the emotional sting from their actions. You no longer need to feel angry, hurt, or betrayed. You simply view their behavior as objective data. Let us look closely at the concept of boundaries. Most people believe that setting a boundary involves an aggressive confrontation or a dramatic announcement. They tell people, "You can no longer treat me this way," or "I am changing my life now." This approach is structurally flawed. It invites debate, signals insecurity, and relies on the other person's compliance to succeed. True boundaries are never loud. They are not negotiated. They are executed. A strategic boundary is an internal decision regarding what you will give your attention, time, and presence to. If a social circle spends its time gossiping, complaining, or engaging in destructive habits, you do not lecture them on their behavior. You do not try to fix them or convince them to change. You simply, quietly, and permanently reduce your availability. When invited to participate in environments that reinforce your old default state, you decline with calm politeness. You do not need to invent elaborate excuses. A simple, "I have commitments I must attend to," is sufficient. Your primary commitment is the engineering of your life. This process naturally leads to a period of social thinning. As you delete your participation in low-value dynamics, your social circle will shrink. This is a necessary phase of the blueprint. The vacuum created by the departure of superficial connections can feel unsettling, but it is the only way to create space for high-level alliances. When you seek to build new relationships within your engineered reality, your focus must shift from superficial chemistry to strategic alignment and shared competence. You must look for individuals who demonstrate high levels of self-awareness, emotional regulation, and personal accountability. These are people who do not complain about variables outside their control, but instead focus entirely on execution. In these interactions, your goal is never strategic dominance or manipulation. Manipulation is a short-sighted strategy used by those who lack actual competence. It builds a foundation of distrust that eventually collapses. True influence is built on mutual benefit, integrity, and absolute reliability. If you want to build a reputation of powerful presence in any network, let your word be flawless. When you say you will deliver something, deliver it ahead of schedule and beyond expectations. In a world characterized by distraction and unreliability, an individual who executes with precision and preserves their integrity becomes an invaluable asset. Furthermore, you must master the art of disciplined listening. Most people enter conversations to speak, convince, or project their ego. The strategic architect enters a conversation to listen, observe, and comprehend. By maintaining emotional control and allowing others to speak without interruption, you learn to read the underlying blueprints of their psychology. You discover their values, their drivers, and their insecurities. This is not done to exploit weaknesses, but to understand human behavior ethically, ensuring that your communication is tailored, effective, and mutually beneficial. When you speak, let your words be sparse and impactful. Avoid the trap of over-explaining your choices or seeking approval for your trajectory. When you talk extensively about your plans, your brain releases a small amount of dopamine, tricking itself into feeling the satisfaction of achievement before any actual work has been performed. This diminishes your drive to execute. Keep your strategy hidden in the quiet laboratory of your mind. Let your progress manifest through your results, not your proclamations. There will be moments when you face overt criticism or skepticism from those who knew you in your old life. They may try to remind you of your past failures or mock your new discipline. Do not engage. The moment you argue with a critic, you validate their position. You signal that their opinion possesses enough gravity to alter your emotional state. Instead, meet criticism with a calm, neutral detachment. A simple nod or an indifferent, "I understand your perspective," completely disarms the interaction. It leaves the critic shouting into an empty room, while you remain completely unbothered, your eyes firmly fixed on the horizon of your objectives. This mastery of human dynamics is not about building walls to isolate yourself out of fear or paranoia. It is about choosing who and what gets to pass through your gates with ultimate discernment. You are the curator of your social ecosystem by treating your time as a finite asset and surrounding yourself with networks that demand excellence. You create an upward spiral of performance. The collective momentum of your environment begins to pull you forward, making your continued transformation not an act of daily warfare, but a natural consequence of the company you keep. The architecture of absolute focus. To completely erase the momentum of your old reality, you must build an unshakable system of cognitive execution. We live in an era where human attention is fragmented by design. The modern landscape is a constant barrage of notifications, demands, and superficial micro-incentives. Most people do not suffer from a lack of talent or ambition. They suffer from chronic attention dispersion. They scatter their mental energy across 100 different vectors, never applying enough concentrated force to a single point to break through the wall of stagnation. To engineer a new reality, you must master the architecture of absolute focus. Let us look at focus not as an emotional state, but as a deliberate engineering discipline. High-level execution requires the convergence of three distinct variables: strategic isolation, cognitive depth, and physiological pacing. If any of these variables are misaligned, the system leaks energy, and the probability of distraction increases. The first step in building an architecture of focus is the elimination of multitasking. The human brain is biologically incapable of processing multiple complex cognitive tasks simultaneously. When you believe you are multitasking, such as checking messages while analyzing a datasheet, you are actually engaged in task switching. Every time your attention moves from your primary task to a secondary stimulus, you pay a cognitive tax, known as attention residue. A portion of your working memory remains anchored to the previous distraction for several minutes after you have turned away from it. If you switch tasks 5 times an hour, your mind remains permanently fragmented, operating at a fraction of its true capacity. Non-negotiable windows of time. The strategic architect implements strict cognitive isolation through deep work blocks. These are non-negotiable windows of time, typically lasting 90 to 120 minutes, where your entire existence is narrowed down to a single objective. Before entering a deep work block, the perimeter must be secured. Your phone is placed in another room, all non-essential browser tabs are closed, and your physical environment is reduced to absolute simplicity. You do not enter this state hoping to focus. You enter it because you have eliminated the structural capacity to do anything else. During the first 20 minutes of a deep work block, you will often encounter a phenomenon known as cognitive friction. Your brain will feel restless. It will generate subtle impulses to check for updates, look for food, or organize trivial items. This is the biological sensation of the mind resisting the deceleration of modern pace. And most people misinterpret this friction as a sign that they are tired or unable to focus, and they abandon the task. But if you maintain physical stillness and refuse to break your posture, the neurological storm will pass. Your brain will begin to down-regulate its alpha waves and enter a state of deep flow. In this zone, your analytical speed increases, your perception of time warps, and the work becomes highly immersive. To sustain this high-level execution, day after day, you must treat your cognitive energy as a finite battery. It requires intentional pacing. The brain cannot maintain deep focus indefinitely. Attempting to force 8 consecutive hours of intense cognitive labor often leads to burnout and diminishing returns. Structure your day around 2 or 3 high-intensity deep blocks, separated by intervals of complete cognitive decompression. During these rest intervals, do not consume media or engage in digital scrolling. Let your mind wander, walk in silence, rest your eyes, or engage in physical movement. This deliberate rest allows your brain to consolidate the information it has processed and recharge its neurochemical reserves for the next assault. Furthermore, you must design a system of metrics that tracks execution rather than intentions. Intentions are cheap. They exist only in the comfort of your mind. Execution is hard data. Create a simple, objective log of your deep work hours. Do not measure how long you sat at your desk. Measure how many minutes your mind was actively engaged in uninterrupted, high-leverage creation. When you begin to track your life with this degree of empirical accuracy, you strip away the illusion of productivity. You see exactly where your energy is being spent and where your system is leaking power. This level of discipline requires you to cultivate a profound comfort with boredom. The modern default state is terrified of empty space. The moment there is a delay in an elevator, a line at a store, or a pause in the day, the hand reaches for the screen to escape the present moment. This constant escape destroys your capacity for sustained thought. By deliberately choosing to sit with boredom, by refusing to stimulate your brain artificially during every open moment, you rebuild your neurological tolerance for depth. You train your mind to be still, to think deeply, and to find satisfaction in long-form progression rather than short-term dopamine spikes. Look at your upcoming week through the lens of this architecture. Are your days a chaotic sequence of reactive meetings and scattered efforts, or are they built around solid pillars of isolated execution? Remember, the world does not reward you for how busy you look. It rewards you for the depth and quality of what you produce. Delete the noise, secure your cognitive perimeter, and let the quiet intensity of absolute focus engineer the reality you have chosen to construct. The automation of discipline and the final transition. To engineer a new reality that lasts, you must remove discipline from the realm of emotional effort and translate it into the realm of architectural automation. The common understanding of discipline is deeply flawed. Most people view it as a continuous, agonizing act of self-denial, a daily war against their own desires. They wake up every morning hoping they will possess the strength to fight their old programming. This approach is highly inefficient. It treats discipline as an active mental expenditure, which inevitably depletes your cognitive battery, leaving you vulnerable to collapse when stress or fatigue peaks. The strategic architect looks at discipline through the lens of systems design. You do not want to rely on your ability to make good choices. You want to design a reality where optimal choices are the default setting of your life. True discipline is not about fighting temptation. It is about organizing your habits, routines, and environment so thoroughly that temptation is stripped of its structural infrastructure. Consider the concept of habit stacking. A habit is a behavioral loop that has been hardwired into your neurology through repetition. Instead of trying to manifest entirely new habits out of thin air, you anchor them directly to pre-existing, automated routines. If you wish to implement a daily ritual of deep strategic planning, you do not simply schedule it for a vague time in the afternoon. You stack it directly onto your morning coffee. The cue is already automated. The environment is already stable. By attaching the new behavior to an established neural pathway, you significantly reduce the friction required to initiate execution. As you automate these systems, you will enter the final transition of reality engineering, the phase of quiet convergence. This is the moment where the old life has been successfully dismantled, the environment has been cleansed, the social dynamics have been calibrated, and the cognitive architecture is firing on all cylinders. The momentum of your past has ground to a halt, and the momentum of your new design is beginning to take over. During this transition, you will notice a distinct change in your internal state. The chaotic urgency that defined your old default state is replaced by an unshakable, calm authority. You no longer feel the need to rush, to prove yourself, or to react to every external variable. You understand that your strategy is structurally sound, and that if you simply protect the execution of the daily systems, the desired outcomes are highly likely to materialize as a natural consequence. This is the point where many individuals make the mistake of celebrating too early. They experience a few weeks of consistent execution, see the initial signs of progress, and allow their standards to soften. They reintroduce a small distraction here, a low-value interaction there, assuming they are now strong enough to handle the exposure. Median 1. This is a severe architectural miscalculation. A new structure requires time to cure. The concrete must harden completely before it can bear maximum load. If you puncture the perimeter while the foundation is still fresh, you invite the old momentum to seep back into the system. Protect this final phase with absolute, uncompromising vigilance. Treat your daily routines as non-negotiable laws of your reality. It does not matter if you feel inspired, tired, successful, or uncertain. The system runs regardless of the weather. When execution becomes non-negotiable, it ceases to be difficult. It simply becomes who you are. Look at your progress not through the lens of dramatic leaps, but through the accumulation of microscopic advantages. A 1% optimization in your focus, a slight refinement in your boundaries, and a minor adjustment to your environment may seem insignificant in isolation, but when compounded over months and years, these micro-advantages create an unbridgeable chasm between your new reality and your old life. You become completely unrecognizable to those who knew you in your past state. You have cleared the land. You have dug the foundation. You have erected the pillars of focus, identity, and environmental sovereignty. The structure of your new life is complete, and the automated systems are running smoothly. Step into this reality with the quiet humility of a true creator. You did not achieve this through luck, chance, or external validation. You engineered it through deliberate strategy, uncompromised ethics, and relentless daily execution. The old life is officially dead. The new reality is now operational. The architecture of longevity. The transition from a life of continuous reaction to a reality of deliberate design is now complete. But the work of an architect does not end when the structure is built. A monument, no matter how magnificent, remains subject to the laws of nature. It faces the steady erosion of time, the unpredictable shifts of the surrounding terrain, and the natural drift toward disorder. To maintain your engineered reality, you must transition from the mindset of a builder to the discipline of a conservator. You must understand how to protect your architecture for the long term. Most people approach transformation as a destination. They believe that once they achieve a certain financial metric, a specific physical standard, or a level of professional recognition, they can finally stop. They view success as a finish line, where they can abandon their discipline and coast on past efforts. This is a profound systemic error. Reality engineering is not an event. It is an ongoing relationship with execution. The systems that lifted you out of stagnation are the exact same systems required to keep you from sliding back into it. Consider the concept of incremental drift. When an aircraft sets a course across an ocean, an error of just 1 single degree at the start will cause it to miss its intended destination by miles. In human life, devastation rarely occurs in a single, catastrophic moment. It happens through microscopic concessions. It is the single morning you choose to hit snooze, the one deep work block you sacrifice to scroll through trivial updates, the brief conversation where you allow a toxic relationship to breach your boundaries. Each individual concession feels harmless in the moment, but collectively, they alter your trajectory. If left uncorrected, you will wake up years from now wondering how you drifted back into the very default state you fought so hard to delete. To prevent this drift, you must implement a system of continuous calibration. Every week, every month, and every quarter, you must step back from the daily mechanics of execution and review the state of your architecture. You look at the data with cold, analytical objectivity. Are your deep work hours increasing or declining? Have elements of physical or digital clutter begun to accumulate in your cleared space? Are your boundaries remaining firm, or have old, low-value dynamics started to creep back into your calendar? This calibration requires absolute personal accountability. You must be willing to catch your own mistakes before they manifest as external failures. If you notice a leak in your system, you do not judge yourself or indulge in emotional regret. You simply tighten the valve. You adjust the parameters. You restore the system to its optimal design. Let us look closely at the internal posture required to sustain this level of excellence over a lifetime. It is a posture of calm, grounded power. True authority never needs to be loud, aggressive, or boastful. The individual who has genuinely mastered their internal landscape and engineered their external space does not need to announce their achievements to the world. They do not seek validation from online crowds or look for applause from their peers. Their confidence is built entirely on self-respect, and their self-respect is built on the simple fact that they keep the promises they make to themselves. This quiet strength leaves a profound mark on the world. When you move through life with absolute strategic clarity, uncompromised ethics, and emotional regulation, you become a stabilizing force in any environment you enter. People naturally notice your focus, your reliability, and your competence. You do not have to manipulate or force your way into positions of influence. Opportunities tend to seek you out because you have made yourself structurally ready to handle them. As you step forward into this reality, remain deeply aware of your responsibility to protect your cognitive sovereignty. The modern world will continue to be a chaotic marketplace of distractions. Corporations will spend billions designing new ways to hijack your attention. Social circles will continue to drift toward comfortable mediocrity, and unexpected challenges will inevitably test your resolve. The terrain will change, but your instruments remain the same. You possess the blueprint. You understand that your identity is a choice, that your environment dictates your habits, that your boundaries protect your energy, and that your focus creates your output. You are no longer blind to the invisible machinery of human behavior. You have stepped out of the crowd of passive spectators and taken your place at the drafting table of your existence. Let go of the person you used to be. Do not carry the weight of past regrets, old failures, or outdated labels into the space you have cleared. Those stories belong to a system that has been deleted. Your only obligation is to the current line of code, the current hour of deep work, and the current day of disciplined execution. Treat each moment as a fresh stone placed in the foundation of your legacy. The noise of the world will continue to swirl around you, but it will no longer move you. You have built a fortress of focus, order, and integrity. Stand firm within its walls, execute your daily strategy with quiet precision, and watch as the reality you designed continues to unfold, hour by hour, day by day, and year by year. The engineering is done, the system is live. Step forward and command your reality.